Sarah Martinez had always been the quiet one in the corporate office. While her colleagues chatted loudly about weekend plans and office gossip, she focused on her computer screen, fingers dancing across the keyboard with practiced precision. At 28, she had earned her position as senior data analyst through sheer determination and countless late nights, not through charm or connections like some others in the company. The morning started like any other Tuesday. Sarah arrived at exactly 7:30, an hour before most of her coworkers, carrying her usual black coffee and a simple bagel. She preferred the peaceful silence of the empty office, where she could organize her thoughts and tackle complex projects without interruption. The soft hum of computers and the distant sound of traffic outside created a comforting background as she settled into her routine. Marcus Thompson burst through the office doors at 9:15, as he did most mornings, bringing with him an energy that seemed to fill every corner of the room. Tall, confident, and armed with an MBA from an expensive university, Marcus had joined the company 6 months ago as a marketing director. His loud laugh echoed through the cubicles as he greeted everyone with exaggerated enthusiasm, slapping backs and making jokes that weren't quite as funny as he believed them to be. Sarah noticed how Marcus commanded attention wherever he went. He had a way of making himself the center of every conversation, often interrupting others to share his own stories or opinions. His expensive suits and perfectly styled hair gave him an air of authority that impressed the executives, even though Sarah had observed that his actual contributions to projects were often surface level at best. The tension between them had been building for weeks. It started with small things, Marcus dismissing Sarah's detailed reports in meetings, talking over her when she tried to present her findings, or making condescending comments about her number crunching as if analytical work was somehow less valuable than his flashy presentations. Sarah had tried to ignore it, focusing on her work and hoping the situation would resolve itself naturally. During the monthly strategy meeting, Sarah had prepared a comprehensive analysis of customer behavior patterns that could save the company thousands of dollars in marketing costs. She had spent weeks gathering data, creating visualizations, and developing actionable recommendations. As she stood to present her findings, Marcus interrupted with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Look, Sarah, I appreciate all the spreadsheet work," he said with a patronizing smile, "but what we really need is creative thinking, not just numbers. Let me show you how real marketing works." The room fell silent. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks as 20 pairs of eyes turned toward her. Marcus continued talking, completely taking over her presentation time to pitch his own ideas that Sarah knew from her data would likely fail and waste the company's budget. She sat down quietly, her carefully prepared notes suddenly feeling worthless in her hands. After the meeting, several colleagues approached Sarah with sympathetic looks and whispered apologies, but no one had spoken up in the moment. This was Marcus's pattern. He wielded his charm and confidence like weapons, making others feel small while positioning himself as the expert in every situation. The breaking point came 3 weeks later during a casual Friday afternoon gathering in the break room. The team was celebrating a successful product launch, and someone had brought cake and coffee. Sarah had contributed significantly to the project's success through her market research and competitive analysis, but, as usual, Marcus was taking most of the credit in his animated storytelling. The key to this whole campaign, Marcus declared to the gathered crowd, was understanding that you can't just rely on boring data. You need vision, creativity, the ability to think outside the box. That's what separates real leaders from. He glanced meaningfully at Sarah. People who just push papers around. Sarah felt something snap inside her chest. Months of accumulated frustration, dismissal, and disrespect crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. She set down her coffee cup with deliberate calm and looked directly at Marcus, who was still basking in the attention of his audience. "Marcus," she said quietly, her voice cutting through his monologue like a knife through butter. The room gradually fell silent as people sensed the shift in atmosphere. Marcus turned toward her with his usual condescending smile, clearly expecting another opportunity to demonstrate his superiority. "Yes, Sarah? Do you have something to add about data analysis?" The way he said data analysis made it sound like she spent her days coloring in children's books. Sarah stood up slowly, her movements measured and controlled. She was several inches shorter than Marcus, but something in her posture commanded the attention of everyone in the room. I've been listening to you for months, Sarah said, her voice steady and clear. You dismiss my work, interrupt my presentations, and treat me like I'm some kind of office furniture. You act like your opinions matter more than facts, like your charm is more valuable than competence. Marcus's smile faltered slightly, but he quickly recovered, spreading his arms in a theatrical gesture of innocence. Hey now, Sarah, I think you're taking things a little too personally. We're all just trying to do our jobs here. No need to get emotional about it. The word emotional hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah could see the calculation behind Marcus's eyes. He was trying to dismiss her anger as typical female hysteria, to make her seem unstable and unreasonable in front of their colleagues. You know what your problem is, Sarah? Marcus continued, his voice taking on a mocking tone that made several people in the room shift uncomfortably. You're so focused on your little numbers and charts that you forget business is about people. It's about relationships, influence, getting things done. And, honestly. He paused for effect, his smile becoming cruel. You won't hurt me with your attitude. I've dealt with difficult people before. The room was completely silent now. Sarah could feel the tension radiating from her co-workers, who clearly wished they were anywhere else. She looked at Marcus for a long moment, studying his face with the same analytical attention she brought to her datasets. Then, slowly, Sarah smiled. It wasn't a warm smile or a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that made people step backward without quite knowing why. I don't long to, she said simply. Marcus blinked, clearly not understanding what she meant. What? I don't long to hurt you, Sarah repeated, her voice soft but somehow carrying to every corner of the room. That would imply I care enough about you to want to cause you pain. But, the truth is, Marcus, I don't think about you at all unless I absolutely have to. Something shifted in Marcus's expression. For the first time since Sarah had known him, he looked uncertain. Sarah picked up her coffee cup and took a small sip before continuing. You see, while you've been busy trying to undermine me and take credit for other people's work, I've been documenting everything. Every meeting where you interrupted me, every idea of mine you claimed as your own, every time you've cost this company money with your creative vision while ignoring the data that could have prevented your mistakes. Marcus's face was beginning to lose some of its color. Sarah, I think I'm not finished, Sarah said quietly, and something in her tone made Marcus's mouth snap shut. I've also been building relationships with our clients, the ones whose accounts you've been mismanaging. Did you know that Henderson Industries specifically requested that I handled their account analysis instead of working with you? They told me your presentations were all flash and no substance. She took another sip of her coffee, letting that information sink in. Around the room, she could see her colleagues exchanging glances, some nodding slightly as if pieces of a puzzle were finally clicking into place. But, here's what's really interesting, Sarah continued, her analytical mind now operating at full capacity. I've been tracking the correlation between your involvement in projects and their success rates. Would you like to know what I found? Marcus seemed to have lost his ability to speak. The confident, dominating presence that usually filled the room had somehow deflated, leaving behind a man who suddenly looked much smaller than his expensive suit suggested. Sarah didn't wait for his answer. Projects where you take the lead role have a 43% higher rate of going over budget and a 37% higher rate of missing deadlines. Client satisfaction scores drop by an average of 18 points when you're the primary contact. And, employee morale in your department has decreased by 25% since you arrived. The silence in the room was deafening. Sarah could see people doing mental calculations, remembering projects that had gone wrong, deadlines that had been missed, clients who had seemed inexplicably unhappy. So when you say I won't hurt you, Sarah said, setting down her coffee cup with a soft clink, you're absolutely right. Because I don't need to. You're doing a perfectly good job of that yourself. With that, Sarah walked calmly out of the break room, leaving behind a group of stunned colleagues and one marketing director who looked like he had just been hit by a freight train he never saw coming. As she returned to her desk, Sarah felt a strange sense of lightness, as if a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying had suddenly been lifted from her shoulders. For the first time in months, she sat down at her computer with a genuine smile on her face, ready to dive back into the work she loved, knowing that things were about to change in ways that Marcus Thompson could never have anticipated. The following Monday morning arrived with an unusual energy crackling through the office corridors. Sarah noticed it immediately as she settled into her workspace with her morning coffee. Conversations seemed more animated than usual, and she caught several colleagues glancing in her direction with expressions that ranged from admiration to curiosity. Marcus arrived later than usual, his normally pristine appearance slightly disheveled. Gone was the booming voice and commanding presence that typically announced his entrance. Instead, he moved quietly to his office, avoiding eye contact with most of his co-workers. Sarah observed this change with the same analytical detachment she applied to market trends, noting but not celebrating his obvious discomfort. The first real test came during the Tuesday morning department meeting. As the team gathered around the conference table, Sarah could feel the subtle shift in dynamics. People who normally focused their attention on Marcus were now looking toward her when complex questions arose. The change was gradual but unmistakable. "Sarah," said Jennifer Walsh, the department director, "I understand you have some insights about the Morrison account that we should discuss." This was territory that Marcus had previously claimed as his own domain. Sarah had prepared for this moment, knowing that her response would set the tone for future interactions. She opened her laptop and projected a clean, comprehensive analysis onto the conference room screen. Based on the client communication patterns and purchase history, Morrison Industries is showing signs of potential churn, Sarah began, her voice steady and professional. Their engagement with our quarterly reports has decreased by 60% over the last 3 months, and their response time to our proposals has increased significantly. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Sarah knew he had been managing the Morrison account with his typical style, flashy presentations and confident promises, but little attention to the underlying data that revealed client satisfaction trends. "What do you recommend?" Jennifer asked, leaning forward with genuine interest. "I've identified 3 specific pain points in their current service experience," Sarah continued. "First, they're receiving generic marketing recommendations that don't align with their industry-specific needs. Second, our reporting schedule conflicts with their internal planning cycles. Third, and most importantly, they've expressed frustration about lack of access to the analytical data behind our recommendations." Around the table, heads nodded in understanding. Sarah noticed Marcus opening his mouth as if to interrupt, then closing it again when he realized he had nothing substantial to add. "I propose we restructure their service package to include monthly data briefings, customize our reporting to match their fiscal calendar, and provide them with direct access to relevant market analytics through our client portal. This approach should address their concerns while potentially increasing their contract value by 15 to 20%. Jennifer made notes as Sarah spoke, then looked around the table. "Any questions or additional thoughts?" Marcus finally found his voice. "Well, I think we should also consider the relationship building aspect. Sometimes clients just need to feel heard, you know? Maybe we could take them out to dinner, show them we value the partnership on a personal level." The suggestion hung awkwardly in the air. Sarah didn't respond directly, but Jennifer's expression suggested she found Marcus's contribution somewhat superficial compared to Sarah's detailed analysis. "Thank you both," Jennifer said diplomatically. "Sarah, can you prepare a formal proposal based on your recommendations? I'd like to review it by Thursday." As the meeting concluded, Sarah gathered her materials with quiet satisfaction. She had presented her ideas without attacking Marcus or drawing attention to his shortcomings. The contrast between their approaches had spoken for itself. Word of Sarah's growing influence began to spread beyond their immediate department. Client Services Manager Robert Chen stopped by her desk that afternoon with an unusual request. "Sarah, I hope you don't mind me asking, but would you be willing to sit in on the presentation for the Blackstone Group proposal? I know it's not technically your project, but your analytical perspective could be really valuable." This was significant. The Blackstone Group represented one of the company's largest potential contracts, and the presentation was being led by Marcus's team. Sarah considered the invitation carefully, recognizing both the opportunity and the potential for workplace drama. "I'd be happy to contribute," she said simply. "What specific aspects would you like me to focus on?" Honestly, I just want to make sure we're presenting realistic projections and that our recommendations are backed by solid data. We can't afford to lose this one. Sarah understood the subtext. Robert had likely observed the same pattern she had documented: Marcus's tendency to overpromise and underdeliver, his reliance on charm rather than substance. The invitation to join the presentation was essentially a safety net. The next morning brought an unexpected email from Marcus himself. Sarah read it twice, analyzing the tone and word choice with the same care she applied to client communications. Sarah, I understand you're joining tomorrow's Blackstone presentation. I wanted to touch base about roles and responsibilities so we don't step on each other's toes. Could we grab coffee to discuss? Marcus, the message was polite, even conciliatory, but Sarah detected underlying anxiety. Marcus was clearly trying to maintain control of the situation while acknowledging her growing influence. She replied with equal politeness, suggesting they meet in the office cafe at 3 o'clock. Their conversation that afternoon proved illuminating. Marcus arrived 5 minutes late, another departure from his usual punctual professionalism. He looked tired, and, for the first time since Sarah had known him, seemed genuinely uncertain about how to proceed. Look, Sarah, he began after they had settled into a corner table with their drinks, I know we got off on the wrong foot. Maybe I was a little too direct in some of our interactions. Sarah said nothing, allowing him to continue. She had learned that silence often revealed more than questions. The thing is, we're both professionals here, and this Blackstone presentation is crucial for the company. I'm hoping we can find a way to collaborate effectively. What did you have in mind? Sarah asked neutrally. Marcus fidgeted with his coffee cup. Well, I was thinking I could handle the strategic vision and relationship aspects, while you focus on the data analysis and projections. You know, play to our respective strengths. Sarah studied his face as he spoke. This was Marcus's attempt to maintain his position while accommodating her expertise. The proposal wasn't unreasonable, but it revealed his assumption that he should remain in the leadership role while she provided support. That could work, Sarah said after a moment. Can you walk me through your strategic vision for Blackstone? I want to make sure my analysis aligns with your overall approach. Marcus brightened, apparently interpreting her question as acceptance of his proposed hierarchy. He launched into a familiar presentation style, talking about synergies and innovative solutions and paradigm shifts. But, as he spoke, Sarah noticed something different. His usual confidence seemed forced, and he kept glancing at her as if seeking validation. Those are interesting concepts, Sarah said when he finished. Have you had a chance to review the Blackstone Company's recent financial reports and market position? I've found some trends that might influence which strategies would be most effective. Marcus's pause was telling. I've looked at the basics, of course. But I was hoping you could dig deeper into the numbers. Sarah nodded slowly. Marcus hadn't done his homework. He was relying on his typical approach of big-picture thinking without understanding the specific client situation. This presentation was going to be even more challenging than she had anticipated. I think it would be helpful if we both spent tonight reviewing the client file in detail, Sarah suggested. Tomorrow's presentation will be stronger if we're both fully prepared. Absolutely, Marcus agreed quickly. Great idea. But Sarah suspected that Marcus would spend the evening practicing his presentation style rather than studying client data. She, on the other hand, had already been analyzing Blackstone's situation for days, identifying opportunities and potential concerns that would need to be addressed during the meeting. As they parted ways, Sarah felt a mixture of anticipation and responsibility. Tomorrow's presentation would be a crucial test, not just for the Blackstone contract, but for the evolving dynamics within her department. She had positioned herself as a voice of expertise and reliability, and now she needed to deliver on that promise. That evening, Sarah stayed late at the office, diving deep into market research and competitive analysis. She prepared multiple scenarios and backup plans, knowing that Marcus's portion of the presentation might require real-time adjustment. By the time she left the building at nearly 9 o'clock, she had developed a comprehensive understanding of Blackstone's business challenges and opportunities. As she drove home through the quiet city streets, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her professional situation had changed in just 1 week. The quiet, overlooked analyst was becoming a recognized voice of authority, not through confrontation or politics, but through consistent demonstration of competence and reliability. Tomorrow would reveal whether her new influence could translate into tangible results for both herself and the company. But, for the first time in months, Sarah felt genuinely excited about the challenge ahead. The Blackstone Group presentation began at 10 o'clock sharp in the company's largest conference room. Sarah arrived 15 minutes early, setting up her materials and testing the projection system with the methodical preparation that had become her trademark. She had prepared 3 different analytical frameworks, each designed to support various directions the conversation might take. Marcus entered just as the Blackstone executives were being escorted into the room. He carried himself with his usual confident stride, but Sarah noticed the subtle signs of nervousness, the way he adjusted his tie twice, the slight tension around his eyes, the forced brightness of his smile as he greeted their potential clients. The Blackstone delegation consisted of 3 people: Catherine Morrison, the chief financial officer, David Park, the director of operations, and Elena Vasquez, a senior analyst whose role seemed similar to Sarah's own position. Sarah made mental notes about each person's body language and apparent priorities as introductions were made around the table. "Thank you all for taking the time to meet with us today," Marcus began, launching into his opening remarks with practiced smoothness. "I'm excited to share our vision for how we can help Blackstone Group achieve unprecedented growth in the coming fiscal year." Sarah watched the clients' faces as Marcus spoke. Catherine Morrison maintained polite attention, but her expression suggested she was waiting for substance behind the enthusiastic rhetoric. David Park took careful notes, while Elena Vasquez seemed particularly focused on the details of Marcus's promises. "The key to success in today's market," Marcus continued, "is thinking beyond traditional approaches. We're not just offering services, we're offering a partnership that will transform how Blackstone approaches its strategic initiatives." Sarah recognized the pattern. Marcus was delivering his standard presentation style, heavy on vision and light on specifics. She could see Elena Vasquez exchange a subtle glance with Catherine Morrison, and Sarah knew they were thinking the same thing she was. This sounded impressive but didn't address Blackstone's actual business challenges. After 20 minutes of broad concepts and optimistic projections, Marcus finally introduced Sarah's portion of the presentation. "And now, Sarah Martinez, our senior data analyst, will walk you through the analytical foundation that supports our strategic recommendations." Sarah stood and moved to the presentation screen with calm confidence. She had structured her analysis to subtly correct the gaps in Marcus's approach while maintaining a collaborative appearance. "Thank you, Marcus," she began. "I'd like to start by sharing what we've learned about Blackstone's current market position and the specific challenges you're facing in the telecommunications sector." She clicked to her first slide, which displayed a comprehensive overview of Blackstone's performance metrics compared to industry benchmarks. The data was presented clearly, with visual elements that made complex information immediately accessible. "Our analysis shows that Blackstone has consistently outperformed industry averages in customer retention, achieving a 91% retention rate compared to the industry standard of 78%, Sarah continued. "However, there are 3 specific areas where targeted improvements could drive significant growth." Catherine Morrison leaned forward, clearly engaged by the fact-based approach. "What areas have you identified?" "First, market penetration in the small business segment," Sarah responded, clicking to a detailed breakdown. "Blackstone currently captures 12% of small business telecommunications spending in your primary markets, while your infrastructure and service capabilities could realistically support 20 to 25% market share." She could see Elena Vasquez nodding as she reviewed the data on her copy of the handout. This was information that Blackstone's internal team had likely identified but hadn't seen quantified and contextualized so clearly. "Second, service bundling optimization. Our analysis indicates that Blackstone's current bundling strategy leaves approximately 18% of potential revenue on the table. Customers who purchase telecommunications services from you are statistically likely to need related services that you could provide, but current cross-selling conversion rates are below industry benchmarks." David Park stopped writing and looked up. Can you be more specific about which services represent the best opportunities? Sarah was ready for this question. Certainly. Based on customer usage patterns and support ticket analysis, cloud storage and cybersecurity services represent the highest potential return on investment. Customers who already trust Blackstone for telecommunications are 63% more likely to consider these related services compared to customers of your competitors. She clicked to a detailed projection showing revenue potential for different service combinations. The numbers were substantial enough to capture serious attention from all three Blackstone executives. And the third area? Catherine Morrison asked. Customer support efficiency, Sarah replied. This is actually Blackstone's strongest competitive advantage, but there's room for improvement that could significantly impact both cost management and customer satisfaction. She displayed a comparison chart showing Blackstone's support metrics against industry leaders. Your first call resolution rate of 84% is excellent, but companies achieving 90% or higher see measurable increases in customer lifetime value. Our analysis suggests that targeted training and system improvements could push Blackstone into that top performance tier. Marcus had been silent during Sarah's presentation, but she could sense his growing discomfort. Her detailed, client-specific analysis was making his generic vision statements seem superficial by comparison. This is exactly the kind of insight we were hoping to see, Elena Vasquez said. But I'm curious about implementation timelines and expected return on investment for these recommendations. Sarah had anticipated this question as well. I've prepared detailed implementation scenarios for each recommendation, with conservative, moderate, and aggressive timeline options. She displayed a comprehensive project timeline that broke down each initiative into manageable phases with specific milestones and success metrics. The level of detail demonstrated not just analytical capability, but practical understanding of how businesses actually implement strategic changes. For the small business market expansion, a conservative approach would target 15% market share within 18 months, generating an estimated $4.2 million in additional annual revenue. The moderate scenario pushes that to 20% market share within 15 months. Catherine Morrison was taking detailed notes now. And what kind of support would Blackstone need from your team to achieve these projections? This was where Marcus tried to regain control of the conversation. We would assign a dedicated account management team led by myself, with regular strategy sessions and quarterly performance reviews. But Elena Vasquez directed her follow-up question to Sarah instead. What specific analytical support would you recommend for tracking progress and making real-time adjustments to the strategy? Sarah recognized the significance of this question. Elena was essentially asking her to design the framework for ongoing collaboration, bypassing Marcus's role as the proposed account leader. I would recommend monthly data reviews focusing on leading indicators rather than just final results, Sarah responded. For the small business expansion, we'd track lead generation quality, conversion rates by market segment, and customer onboarding efficiency. This approach allows for strategy adjustments before problems become visible in revenue numbers. She outlined a comprehensive monitoring system that would provide Blackstone with unprecedented insight into their market performance. The level of detail and practical applicability clearly impressed the client team. The meeting continued for another hour, with most questions directed towards Sarah's analysis rather than Marcus's strategic concepts. By the time they concluded, the dynamic had shifted completely from Marcus's initial vision presentation to a detailed discussion of implementation specifics. Thank you both for a very informative presentation, Catherine Morrison said as the meeting wrapped up. We'll be in touch with our decision within the next week. But, as the Blackstone team gathered their materials, Elena Vasquez approached Sarah directly. Would it be possible to schedule a follow-up call to discuss the analytical framework in more detail? I'd like to understand how we might integrate your monitoring approach with our internal reporting systems. Sarah glanced at Marcus, who was clearly struggling with the fact that the client was requesting additional contact with her rather than him. Of course, Sarah replied. I'll coordinate with Marcus to make sure we provide you with comprehensive support. The political grace of including Marcus in her response wasn't lost on anyone in the room, but the message was clear: the client valued Sarah's expertise as the primary point of contact for substantive discussions. After the Blackstone team left, Marcus and Sarah found themselves alone in the conference room. The silence stretched uncomfortably as Marcus seemed to wrestle with how to address what had just occurred. "That went well," he finally said, his tone carefully neutral. "I think so too," Sarah replied, beginning to pack up her presentation materials. They seemed genuinely interested in the implementation details. Marcus watched her organize her papers with the same systematic approach she applied to everything else. "Sarah, I want you to know that I appreciate the thorough analysis you prepared. It really strengthened our position." This was as close to an admission of dependence as Marcus was likely to make. Sarah looked up from her laptop case, studying his expression with her characteristic analytical attention. "We work well together when we focus on what's best for the client," she said simply. The statement was diplomatic but carried an unmistakable message. Sarah was willing to collaborate, but the days of accepting dismissive treatment were over. Marcus seemed to understand this shift, nodding slowly as he processed the new reality of their professional relationship. As they left the conference room together, Sarah felt a quiet satisfaction that had nothing to do with defeating Marcus or proving him wrong. Instead, she had demonstrated that competence and preparation could speak louder than charisma and politics. The client had recognized value, and that recognition was changing everything about how she was perceived within the company. The real test would come when they received Blackstone's decision, but Sarah was confident in the strength of their proposal. More importantly, she was confident in her own ability to deliver on the promises she had made. After years of being overlooked and underestimated, Sarah Martinez was finally being seen for who she had always been, a skilled professional whose quiet competence could drive real results. The call came on a Thursday afternoon, exactly 1 week after the Blackstone presentation. Sarah was deep in quarterly analysis when Jennifer Walsh appeared at her desk with an expression that Sarah couldn't quite read. "Sarah, could you join me in my office? We just heard from Blackstone Group." Sarah saved her work and followed Jennifer down the hallway, noting that Marcus was already seated in one of the chairs facing Jennifer's desk. His posture was rigid, and he avoided making eye contact as Sarah entered the room. "Please, sit," Jennifer said, settling behind her desk with a manila folder in her hands. "I wanted to share Blackstone's decision with both of you at the same time, since you both contributed to the presentation." Sarah waited quietly, while Marcus shifted in his chair with obvious anxiety. Jennifer opened the folder and pulled out a formal letter with the Blackstone Group letterhead. "They've accepted our proposal," Jennifer announced, "but with some specific requirements about how the account will be managed." Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction tempered by professional curiosity about those requirements. Marcus seemed to relax slightly at the news of acceptance, but his relief was premature. Catherine Morrison specifically requested that Sarah serve as the primary analytical consultant on the account, Jennifer continued. "They want monthly data reviews and direct access to her insights throughout the implementation process." Marcus's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, realization, and, finally, a forced attempt at gracious acceptance. That's great news," he managed. "Sarah's analysis was definitely a key factor in our success." Jennifer nodded, but her attention was focused on Sarah. "They're also requesting that you lead the quarterly strategic reviews. This is a significant responsibility, Sarah. The Blackstone contract is worth $2.8 million annually, with potential for expansion if the initial implementation goes well." Sarah absorbed this information with her characteristic calm, but internally she was processing the magnitude of what was happening. This wasn't just professional recognition, it was a fundamental shift in her career trajectory. "I'm honored by their confidence," Sarah replied. "When would they like to begin the implementation process?" "Next Monday," Jennifer said. "Which brings me to the next topic I wanted to discuss with both of you." She turned to Marcus with an expression that suggested this conversation had been planned carefully. "Marcus, I've been reviewing the departmental performance metrics, and I think it's time we had an honest discussion about role optimization." Sarah recognized the corporate euphemism, but she remained silent, allowing Jennifer to navigate what was clearly a delicate management situation. The feedback from several clients has indicated that our most successful projects tend to be data-driven rather than presentation-focused, Jennifer continued diplomatically. I'm thinking we should restructure the team to better leverage everyone's strengths. Marcus seemed to shrink in his chair. What did you have in mind? I'd like you to transition into a business development role, focusing on identifying new opportunities and initial client outreach. Your networking skills and presentation abilities would be perfect for generating leads and making first impressions. Sarah understood immediately. Jennifer was essentially moving Marcus away from account management and strategic planning, areas where his weaknesses had become apparent, while positioning him in a role that utilized his actual strengths. Meanwhile, Jennifer continued, turning back to Sarah, I'm promoting you to senior account strategist. You'll be managing our top-tier clients, including Blackstone, and leading the analytical framework for all major proposals. The promotion represented everything Sarah had worked toward, but she accepted it with the same quiet professionalism that had brought her to this moment. Thank you. I look forward to the challenge. Marcus attempted a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Congratulations, Sarah. You've definitely earned it. After they left Jennifer's office, Marcus walked with Sarah toward the elevator bank. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken acknowledgement of how dramatically their professional relationship had shifted. Sarah, Marcus said as they reached the elevators, I owe you an apology. Sarah turned to face him, surprised by the directness of his statement. I treated you poorly when I first arrived here, he continued. I made assumptions about your role and your capabilities, and I was wrong. What you demonstrated with Blackstone, that level of analytical depth and client focus, that's exactly what this company needs. Sarah studied his face, looking for signs of insincerity or manipulation, but Marcus seemed genuinely humbled by recent events. I appreciate you saying that, Sarah replied. I think we can both be more effective when we focus on what we do best rather than trying to compete with each other. Marcus nodded. I'd like to find ways to support your success going forward. Maybe my networking contacts could help you identify expansion opportunities for your accounts? This was an olive branch, and Sarah recognized the wisdom of accepting it gracefully. Marcus might have been arrogant and dismissive, but he did have valuable skills that could contribute to team success when properly directed. That could be very helpful, Sarah agreed. Let's set up a weekly coordination meeting to discuss potential synergies. As the elevator arrived, Sarah reflected on how much had changed in just a few weeks. The quiet analyst who had been dismissed and overlooked was now managing the company's most important client relationships. But, more importantly, she had earned that position through competence and professionalism rather than politics or manipulation. The following Monday brought Sarah's first official meeting as Blackstone's primary consultant. Elena Vasquez had flown in specifically for the session, bringing with her a detailed list of questions and implementation concerns. We're excited to begin this partnership, Elena said as they settled into the conference room, but I want to make sure we establish clear success metrics from the beginning. Sarah had prepared extensively for this conversation, developing a comprehensive framework for measuring progress across all three strategic areas they had identified. I've created a dashboard system that will track 12 key performance indicators, Sarah began, displaying her analysis on the room's large monitor. Each metric has baseline measurements, target benchmarks, and early warning thresholds that will help us identify issues before they impact results. Elena reviewed the dashboard with obvious approval. This is exactly what we need. Our internal team has been struggling to create this kind of integrated view of our performance. Over the next 2 hours, they worked through implementation timelines, resource requirements, and communication protocols. Sarah found herself energized by the collaborative problem-solving process, using her analytical skills to address real business challenges with measurable impact. There's one more thing I wanted to discuss, Elena said as their meeting concluded. Blackstone is considering expanding our telecommunications infrastructure into 3 new regional markets next year. Would your team be interested in conducting the feasibility analysis for that expansion? Sarah kept her expression professional, but internally she was thrilled. This was exactly the kind of opportunity that could establish her reputation as a strategic consultant rather than just a data analyst. We'd definitely be interested, Sarah replied. Can you share some preliminary information about the target markets? I'd like to begin some initial research to help you evaluate the scope and timeline for a comprehensive analysis. As Elena provided the basic details, Sarah was already formulating analytical approaches and data sources that would be needed for the expansion study. This project could potentially double the value of the Blackstone relationship and establish Sarah as the go-to expert for telecommunications market analysis. After Elena left, Sarah returned to her desk, actually, her new office, which Jennifer had arranged as part of her promotion. The space was small but private, with a window overlooking the city and enough room for the multiple monitors she needed for complex analytical work. She found a congratulatory email from Robert Chen, thanking her for her work on the Blackstone presentation and asking if she would be interested in consulting on 2 other major proposals. Word of her success was spreading throughout the company, generating exactly the kind of recognition she had quietly sought for years. But the most meaningful message came from an unexpected source. Marcus had sent a brief email with the subject line "Team Success," containing contact information for 3 potential clients he had met at a recent industry conference. Thought these might be good prospects for your analytical approach, the message read. All 3 mentioned challenges with market positioning that sound right up your alley. Let me know if you'd like me to make introductions. Sarah smiled as she read the message. Marcus was genuinely trying to contribute to her success, which represented a complete reversal from his earlier attitude of competitive dismissal. As she began researching the potential clients Marcus had identified, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. She hadn't set out to transform her career through confrontation or political maneuvering. Instead, she had simply refused to accept dismissive treatment and had consistently demonstrated her professional capabilities. The moment in the break room when Marcus had mocked her, claiming she wouldn't hurt him, seemed like it had happened months ago rather than weeks. Her response, that she didn't long to hurt him, had been more prophetic than she had realized at the time. Sarah hadn't needed to attack Marcus or undermine his position. She had simply continued doing excellent work while refusing to accept being marginalized. The quality of her contributions had spoken for itself, creating opportunities that naturally elevated her professional standing. Now, as senior account strategist with responsibility for the company's most important clients, Sarah was positioned to build the kind of career she had always envisioned. She had earned respect through competence, influence through reliability, and success through the simple but powerful strategy of being consistently excellent at what she did. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. Catherine Morrison from Blackstone was calling personally to thank her for the implementation framework and to discuss accelerating the timeline for the small business market expansion. Sarah, your analysis has given us confidence to move more aggressively than we initially planned, Catherine said. Can you support a 12-month timeline instead of 18 months? We think the market opportunity is strong enough to justify the faster pace. Sarah opened her project planning software, already calculating resource requirements and risk factors for the accelerated timeline. Let me run some scenarios and get back to you with a detailed assessment by tomorrow morning. As she ended the call and dove into the analytical challenge, Sarah felt the deep satisfaction that came from work that mattered, recognition that was earned, and influence that was built on substance rather than style. Marcus Thompson had been wrong about many things, but he had been absolutely right about one thing: Sarah Martinez hadn't hurt him. She had simply shown him what real professional excellence looked like, and that had been far more powerful than any deliberate attack could ever have been.